but this day is just getting started. It is time to take a look at North America, and first up on the chopping block going to be Super Frogs versus Never Lucky. The winner of this gets to go to the grand final. The loser has to play against Method Orange. Never Lucky was the team to send him there in the first place. Super Frogs, a team that's been dominant throughout the entire year. It doesn't get much better than this. My name is Rich. I'm going to be your host, joined by Zico, Supertees, and Van Rookie. Guys, we just saw the composition that Never Lucky play yesterday. They played it yesterday. The thing that won EU. How important is that in this first matchup, though?
I think it's going to be very important, but there was some stylistic differences in how Never Lucky played it and how Wildcard Gaming were able to use this composition. Now, Never Lucky, they played it a lot more aggressively, trying to win the game very, very quickly with overwhelming damage and a grapple weapon. And then on the side of Wildcard Gaming, we saw a little bit more defensive adaptation of that composition, where they weren't using Way of the Crane as frequently, but they were trying to play for the long game and really make it count when they did use that big damage ability. Now, I'm interested to see if Colo has been sitting with his notepad, basically just writing down, okay, these talents were they using, this is how they were talenting and using their Azerite, and I'm going to do the same thing here and potentially use the same thing, because Super Frogs, they also have that Mage Lock Druid. They have some of those compositions that we saw from Method Black, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they decide to actually use this composition.
Sounds like a lot of work, right? And you may be asking yourself, why don't they just take the Sunday off? Well, some teams have. I hope they're enjoying their time off, but as you can see right here, what they're trying to play for is a spot at the LAN, and those teams above the line right now are safe. As you can see, Never Lucky is way down in that 8th spot with 100 points, and they can leap over such a large portion of the competition. You look at the move didn't even make it to the top 8. There is so much opportunity here for Never Lucky to become one of those top 4 teams, to become one of the teams that we talk about going to LAN for North America, but getting through the Super Frogs is not going to be an easy task at all. Already Never Lucky, though, looking really impressive so far in this tournament. I mean, the fact that one of the teams that they may have to play against, being Method Orange, another fantastically strong team, is a team they already took down, said that's going to be pretty good for Colo and the squad.
Yeah, I mean, Colo's team has the exact same composition that we already saw dominate Europe, and I would say that Method Black, their roster is basically, if you took the Super Frogs and Method Orange and put them together, that's Method Black. But on NA, that combination of comps isn't available, so it's a little bit more predictable for Never Lucky to be able to find victory here. I mean, Snuts' team has either got the Wizards or the Rogue Mage or maybe the Rogue Warlock, and we've just seen that play out. This is definitely Never Lucky's tournament. If there was a tournament for them to bounce into that 4th place spot, this is it. So if they've practiced it and they've studied and effectively copied and can replicate what we've seen from Europe, Colo's revenge might be an episode here today.
Colo wants to take over the entire region, and this team, I think the big thing when we look at North America, typically, I feel like you take the top teams from North America, and obviously, globally, they can really hang with the best of them, but the depth of rosters was never quite as large. This year, every single player, I feel like, has found the perfect team. Colo, not going to be any different. Snuts, not going to be any different. We see powerhouse roster after powerhouse roster in NA. That's why it's been so close for the top 4, but now Never Lucky and the Super Frogs will go head-to-head. We're going to see that composition that Never Lucky used yesterday, that we saw in EU, but you're going up against Chanimal, an absolute god.
This composition is unique to North America, with Storm running at first, Nesper and Maldiva, the Destruction Warlock, Assassination Rogue, and Super Frogs are looking to rely on it here in game number 1, facing down Never Lucky's Windwalker, Death Knight, Mistweaver composition. So it's the first time we'll really get to see this matchup play out, but the boys weren't able to take him out either. So we see pressure on Chanimal early on. Iron Bark needs to be enough here. If they overlap with Unending Resolve, that's going to be devastating. I mean, maybe they have to. Chanimal's just taking a beating.
Oh, that is a rough start.
Big damage coming into Chanimal there, but also on the side of Valido is going to have to deflect with that anti-magic zone, and now Zach is taking a little bit of the damage, and I want to see them do exactly this. I want to see them punish Zach and try to force him back. As we see Colo activate that Way of the Crane, though, no Iron Bark available for Cubsy. How are you going to deflect this? This could potentially be the Unending Resolve. Chanimal is trying to hold on to it. Beautiful death grip there onto Cubsy, interrupting that heal, but Chanimal should be able to stabilize for now, as that Way of the Crane threat has faded. it, and Colo didn't combine it with that mana tea, I don't believe, so that's going to cost him a big chunk of that mana. As we see Cubsy sit down as well for a drink, Colo though going to be able to stop that with the Paralyze as they look to turn the pressure actually onto Colo. Snuts looking for a nice swap here, followed up by the bash. Big damage here onto Colo, but he does get that life cocoon out by the skin of his teeth.
I will say just the mana management from Colo is way less efficient than we saw from the European counterpart Looney, and that's been the big difference between those teams overall. And it could just also be experience. We've seen Looney even in Legion focusing on that Mistweaver a lot more heavily, and Colo may have been spreading his resources too thin. They've definitely got good setup, but they need that late game potential as well if they're going to take down such a formidable opponent as Chanimal.
I don't think that the question with Neverlucky is going to be what they decide to play. It is whether or not they've been able to invest time into all of these different counter comps that they do focus on. When we saw Colo able to win with this composition with Zach and Valido, it was very much focused on targeting Mez when he was playing a Death Knight, and he was able to actually make sure with Grapple Weapon they were taking that out of the equation. You couldn't Death Strike, you couldn't stay healthy. Chanimal is going to receive a lot of pressure here. Way of the Crane going to be shrugged off by a Fear. Chanimal still hasn't had to trade out that unending resolve, and it's going to be Zach who takes a little bit of the pressure here, even though that major cooldown is going to be used to keep him healthy.
Their damage and their setup looks good on the side of Neverlucky, but we saw that Looney had a mana lead over Chaz, whereas right now it's pretty much even. At least pressure still in favor of Neverlucky as Chanimal tries to battle back. Dark Soul rolling, he really wants to get some big burst off, looking for a Chaos Bolt. Gets one onto Valido, but with Anti-Magic Shield trades quite evenly. Snuts is trying to pressure down Colo in a solo mission, and I don't think an Assassination Rogue, maybe with a Spell Lock, is Snuts going to be able to take Colo down by himself here behind the pillar? He at least gets Life Cocoon for that effort, which is a lot better than nothing. Cubsy gripped into the stun, but now with double Mortal Coil, Chanimal defends.
Yeah, and Snuts is actually doing so much work in this matchup, consistently swapping to Colo with those kidney shots, applying pressure there, making sure he has bleeds onto Valido as well as Zach, and he also is playing that Flying Daggers, Hidden Blades build, making sure that his Fan of Knives is just doing tons and tons of damage whenever he's hitting multiple targets. As you can see at the bottom of your screen there now, we see a big push happening here onto Chanimal. He might have to use his Unending Resolve here. Cubsy though, looking to deflect with the Iron Bark. Also a nice blind sap there onto Colo, playing that Relentless talent. He's going to deny majority of that Way of the Crane, and Colo again did not combo it with that mana tea, so now he's basically running out of mana. Cubsy still has a lot of mana to work with. Chanimal still has his Unending Resolve available. Super Frogs have a big lead at the moment.
Neverlucky, they're over eager. Zach is getting bursted down with Infernals having landed. If Chanimal can sneak in a Chaos Bolt, it could snag him a kill. Multiple members at critically low health. Chanimal goes for the Chaos Bolt. Anti-Magic Zone and Life Cocoon soak the hit and keep Colo alive, but his mana is just so tapped. Zach now dips low. Touch of Karma redirects. We could see another ward potentially from Chanimal. Wants to hold on to it for the Maledict push. Ring of Peace, knocking Chanimal out in the open. He's getting bursted potentially anyway. Neverlucky can just overwhelm the Super Frog. Zach still in the back foot. Snuts on target. Nice kick onto Colo. Good setup here by the team of the Super Frogs. All three targets in tons of trouble. Colo manages somehow to struggle through it and at least keep them alive, but for how much longer can he really do it? Ducking around the corner. Zach catches a couple of Vivifies. Valido soaks the hit with Anti-Magic Shield. They're spreading their defense effectively, but with Kidney Shot secured, Valido once again carries. Good interrupt. Colo flails to stay alive. If he can somehow get mana for a Way of the Crane, they could run Chanimal over. Colo needs to live to that point.
Yeah, and now we see again the Iron Bark from Cubsy preemptively placed onto Chanimal, but it might not be enough as he's taking huge damage. Nice follow-up stun there onto Cubsy as well, but Cubsy should be able to deflect because of that preemptive Iron Bark. Now Zach taking the brunt of the damage, caught up in that kidney shot, Sid.
Huge Chaos Bolt. Zach portals out of line of sight, ducking for cover, but Valido's now left out alone in midfield. Chanimal looks to set up and close this. Both healers basically tapped on mana and completely tapped on defense. Zach needs a few more seconds. Valido once again soaking huge hits for the team with that Icebound Fortitude, dampening having just stepped foot in the arena. Cubsy's looking for a drink. They have to stop that. Colo's blind breaks. Critical mistake here by the side of the Super Frogs. Maybe an opening for Colo. Way in the crane gets activated. Touch of Karma redirects the damage. This is going to be a huge hit on Chanimal. Even though Zach is very low on health, the damage could just overwhelm Chanimal as Never Lucky battle to stay in it. Comes in, needs 5 more seconds. I don't think he's going to get it. He gets stun locked. Chanimal defends once again. Double Mortal Coil. Is it going to be enough? Chanimal lives to the Iron Bark. Zach gets life cocooned. Both teams continue trading, but there's now once again nothing for Chanimal, nothing for Zach, and it's a game of chicken. Who is going to run first? Zach is just running headlong in with that touch of death, but he's so low. Colo tries to make it over, catch one heal, but Snuts shadow steps to Colo to kill Zach around the corner. Super Frogs put a point on the board.
And this composition looked a lot different just a few minutes ago when we were seeing a wild card gaming play it. And I want to ask you right now, Zico, is it because of the composition that they are currently running into, or is it because of how they played it?
I think it's a mixture of both. Honestly, Looney just plays the Monk a little bit more mana efficient. He also plays with different talents. Colo, of course, was not running that reduced cooldown on his Transcendence like Looney was. Looney was kind of playing a bit more defensive in his role, but also Colo didn't really combo his Mana Tea, that big mana reducing ability, with his Way of the Crane, that big mana cost ability. So we did see Colo basically having to essentially use a lot of expensive Ways of the Crane, and that put him in a situation where he just didn't have that much to work with. In addition, Snuts was just doing so much work as well for his team, consistently swapping back and forth between the targets and making sure that that Flying Daggers build really got to do a lot of work. Because of those DK pets as well, whenever the melees were stacked up onto Chanimal, he found an opportunity to kidney shot Colo, put up his bleeds, apply pressure there, then go back up Chanimal with that cleave pressure from the Fan of Knives, and that just accelerated the game a lot in their favor.
I think yesterday Chan was probably my MVP period, like regardless of region. Today it's looking like it may be Snuts, and I'm gonna jump into the future here for a second, Ben. If we keep seeing this series go the way that it does, doesn't it kind of seem like we might get into a situation where maybe we see Never Lucky drop down? Maybe they potentially get to destroy Method Orange because we saw how good this comp worked against them. Unless Method Orange has a surprise, then they go back to the grand final to potentially get destroyed again. This is one of those days where it's starting to unfold very quickly. Already the Super Frogs just looking that much scarier.
Yeah, well, Super Frogs have been scary this entire season. I think them adding Snuts and him sort of flexing as a multi-classer has been paying off for them huge. Snuts has really impressed me, like he always has as a multi-classer, and I think his ability to play Rogue, Elemental Shaman, Shadow Priest, Destruction Warlock, all these different classes at the highest level really just complement and synergize with this team so well. And Super Frogs is looking like they could potentially be the best team in North America.
Or the world. Snuts is absolutely nuts, and when we do look at everything that is going on, you kind of look at what Swapsy's doing, and I was like, there are going to be big parallels between Swapsy and Snuts. And, you know, today we saw Swapsy need to be in that position where he had to play Warlock, for example, right? Obviously very different teams. You don't have Chanimal on that team, but we can see that role and how crucial it really is in the current meta. You need a player like that. Swapsy's fantastic at it, and so is Snuts.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups, too, that potentially Method Black is looking at because they can run this Rogue Lock Druid, and if they feel like it is a good matchup into this Windwalker Death Knight Mistweaver, maybe that's something that we see them implement next week.
Sid, how do you feel about that? What do you think compositionally right now?
I mean, I think the Windwalker Death Knight Mistweaver has got an advantage against basically anything the Super Frogs have, and Colo just needs to be more patient and play more defensive. I said even in the first game, they're just over-eager. They're like getting excited, setting up crowd control and trying to find a kill, but right now it's just about slow and steady, play for the long game, look for setups, but play for the long game is the main point of contention. If Colo still had mana at the end of the game, he could have gotten 2 more Way of the Cranes in, and instead of 1, which could have been the kill then at the end of the game. So I do want to see Colo just slow down, go for the Mana Tea combo with the Way of the Crane, focus more on defense, and then do big pushes similar to Looney.
So also, folks, if you don't know, you can actually use that plugin right now, which is going to be powered by Wowhead, and you can see everything that the guys are wearing in the arena, the traits that they are using, the talents that they are using. You can see their full build. Did you notice anything with the builds? Are we seeing Colo maybe move to more of that European style that we saw earlier today, or is he still going for something somewhat similar as to what he used when he broke it out yesterday for the first time?
I mean, to be fair, he's not fighting at all the same compositions. I think the Rogue Warlock is a bit different. I could see the shorter cooldown on Transcendence being useful so that a situation like at the end of the game, Colo wanted to roll in line of sight to heal Zach, but he rolled, and that's still in line of sight of the rogue to Shadow Step. If that was just Transcendence and he's out of line of sight, maybe he tops Zach off there at that point of the game and then comes out for another push. So it's just very minor difference really on that part. It's mostly just mana efficiency is the bigger deal, much less so I think than build.
Yeah, so it really is going to be the mana that we do need to keep our eyes on with Colo to see what he is able to do, and if they're going to be able to turn it around on Dalaran Sewers. Do you think there's any chance that we see a different composition come out from Never Lucky?
I think the composition that they brought forward in game number 1 and what we've seen them run in this tournament so far is probably their best answer. That was a really close game, and I think we don't give enough credit to what being a little bit more conservative with your mana does, because like we saw in the grand finals for the European region, that last game, you can make efficient trades as Windwalker Death Knight. The Unending Resolve is a really long cooldown for Chanimal, so if you make a push, you get that out, you have 3 minutes, a 3-minute window where you can continue to push, regenerate your Touch of Death, have Way of the Crane available to make a final push and try to take Chanimals down. You don't need to be in there making unfavorable trades. Just play it smart, calm, cool, and collected. Exactly what we saw from Wildcard Gaming. I think Never Lucky definitely has a great shot.
Does anything else need to change besides mana efficiency in your mind, Zico?
I really think that's the biggest thing, mana efficiency, and I'm not really sure what Velida could be doing differently, maybe to try to help Colo out with Snuts, but he definitely felt like a lot of opportunity for the side of Super Frogs came at the back of those swaps that Snuts was doing towards Colo. Even at the very start of the game, they nearly took down Colo with a kidney shot into a bash. He dropped to about 10% or so, barely got that cocoon out to save himself. So I feel like there's a lot of more pressure on Colo as well, which just makes him use a lot more mana in general. So if Velido can maybe do what we saw Zeepai do when they were facing Method Black against as Rogue Mage, where we saw Waz step Kidney the healer, and then we saw Zeepai on the DK immediately grip Waz back when he didn't have that Shadow Step, Chains of Ice him, and basically negate those swaps a little bit more. Potentially that could help Colo out a little bit as well, but I really do think some of it just comes down to his own mana efficiency as well as some of those PvP talents being different from what we saw from Looney.
All right, well, we already know what we want to see change on the desk. We know that Never Lucky can still win this series. The first game going to be a bit of a doozy for them. The Super Frogs, a very tough opponent, and you got to keep in your mind right now, Super Frogs want to just get that much further ahead from the boys. They entered this tournament, both teams were tied with 300 points in the region. Never Lucky, on the other hand, needs to jump up from this tournament from 8th all the way up to 4th. That really is their goal, to try to make that giant leap, but currently it is the Super Frogs that are getting that leap in this series.
Yeah, and there's not that big of a difference between 8th and 4th. It's only a 32-point difference, so if they can do well in this tournament, they can absolutely make that leap and be in that top 4, which is going to be ultra important. Nice little setup here early on coming in from Never Lucky. Chanimals gets bursted down, and what we're really looking for in this game is how aggressive is Colo going to play. So he's going to use the Way of the Crane on cooldown. Is he going to really pick his moment? Right now, Never Lucky actually has a lot of pressure rolling.
Yeah, and we see Colo immediately activating that Way of the Crane, not combo with the Mana Tea again. Big damage though coming in here. He activates his personal defensive cooldown as well, so he can kind of negate that swap. Colo is going to be forced to use his human racial, and he actually went in there and burned quite a bit of cooldowns. Had one big beefy Chaos Ball from Chanimal connects. We see big damage here from Chanimal, counter pressuring Zach as well, dropping fairly low here, but as Chanimal seems to be the one taking the brunt of the damage, he's going to activate that Cataclysm, try to counter pressure Zach back, but Zach just seems to be unrelenting with that pressure, and if one of these Chaos Balls sneaks through from Chanimal, we could see a touch of Karma potentially coming out very early on in this match.
Yeah, Snuts realizing he needs to help Chanimals out here, get a little pressure. Like you said, Zach and Velido, they have a lot of self-healing and interrupts available for Chanimal, so him generating pressure by himself isn't necessarily that easy. So if Snuts just sits on Colo, I don't think they're going to be able to get a whole bunch done, but I do really like when Snuts makes the swaps on Colo. So gets a kidney shot when Colo moves in. That's a great opportunity to really punish him. Cubsy looking for some mana. Colo shuts it down, and Colo's been doing a little bit better job in this matchup, conserving that mana, and that's something that Never Lucky definitely has in their favor. They could potentially get a massive mana lead.
And Zico, one of my big questions for you, we talk about the Way of the Crane. We know how strong it was yesterday. It was all about those Way of the Crane goes, trying to close out the game as quickly as possible. In this particular matchup, how do you want to see this powerful offensive and defensive ability used?
Well, I want to see the Iron Bark of Cubsy. Like right now, completely forced. Then I want to see Chanimal drop fairly low, and then I want to see Colo push in for the paralyze. Go for the way of the crane. Nice knock there with that ring of peace on the Chanimal. He's actually going to get rooted down there as well. Chanimal again though, playing with that reflect, going to reflect one of those Maledict trinkets. Going to save him a lot of the pressure. Colo now going for the paralyze into the leg sweep. This could be a beautiful opportunity to activate that way of the crane, but Cubsy's going to deflect with his trinket. Chanimal though not out of the woods yet, as we see his Gladiator's Medallion procced, and there we go. Colo going to be using a way of the crane, but Snuts again deflecting with a nice blind sap. Zach though taking big pressure. Touch of Karma might not even be enough. He might need to port out of there completely. Colo not getting a single global up with that way of the crane. Zach no longer has that touch of Karma. Colo caught up in the kidney shot. We see the Maledict Trinket flying to Zach. He could potentially just go down all the way right here. Another Maledict Trinket flying in behind that pillar, as Zach might be battling for his life, and he will go down.
That was I feel like Zach way overstayed his welcome in that situation. He could have just poured it away. I feel like he really mismanaged his defensive cooldowns in order to go down there. It was a beautiful setup from Super Frogs, really punishing Colo for playing Relentless. You saw he activated the way of the crane. He came in, got blinded, and that's when the control really stepped up for Super Frogs. They were able to deny, but I feel like Zach really underreacted to that situation.
I think that that's fair. That's one of those things where it's both of those things going wrong. It's one team making a mistake and the other team playing out of their mind, and the results tend to be pretty obvious. But Snuts definitely becoming that MVP for me today. You just see that beautiful blind right into a sap, and there the writing is on the wall. It looks like Zach's going to go down.
Right there, Colo getting blinded on his way of the crane, and this is a mistake. He got the leg sweep on Cubsy. Cubsy had to trinket. Cubsy's mana is looking super bad. Just don't push in here. You got the trinket. If Cubsy sits there, I want to see that way of the crane to punish the fact that Cubsy's sitting there. But since you have the blind still on the enemy side, Zach doesn't have his touch of Karma, you're not going to be completely out of the woods yet. Zach's going to try to remove some of those Maledicts there, but it's not going to be enough. Colo as well, getting feared DR off of that sap into a kidney shot from Snuts as well. You got to give it to Chanimal and Snuts, always playing to their win condition, but it really felt like Never Lucky had that game in the bag. Cubsy had barely any mana. It's a small map. It's unlikely that he gets to drink. You pushed in, you paralyzed Cubsy, you leg sweeped him, you got the trinket. There's no more need to be aggressive there. You can instead just stay back like Looney was doing, wait a little bit for those cooldowns to come up again, and then when you have those CCs, you can push in and use them, and then punish with the way of the crane, maybe get the unending resolve, and then you can slowly but surely get a small advantage each and every time you do that and win.
You think of all those years that Chan and Snuts were rivals, and then just realized the answer was they should have just played together the whole time. They look insane. And the question is, are they going to be able to be the first team to make their way into the North American Grand Final? We're going to find out very soon.
And things like that in the past, that he signs up with rosters just to counter comp a certain team that he doesn't like and try and knock them out.
I've never heard Colo say that, but you know, we'll have to ask him. But we'll do a little bit of an off-camera interview a little bit later and ask him what his intentions are. But I do know one thing that I have heard from him time and time again is he has faith in the players on his team, primarily Zach. Zach, a younger player who has done nothing but prove to Colo that he is somebody who is willing to put in the work to multi-class and to try to get enough points to make it to the LAN. But if they don't manage to pull off this victory here, they're going to have a rematch against Method Orange to try to get to the grand final.
And I'm actually a little surprised for Never Lucky. Zach actually in the last map was the main target, but he's actually opted to go with out the Fortifying Elixir, which is a bit curious as it is such a solid amount of defense available for him. Early on, Never Lucky push in. They get the triple leg sweep onto Chanimals, Nuts, and Cubsy. Good amount of pressure here, but Chanimals responds with his Infernals, looking to really counter pressure Never Lucky.
I mean, Chanimals just under huge pressure right now by Never Lucky. Deflects with the double Mortal Coil right at the final second, now looking to counter aggress. Trying to find a target. Snuts is going after Colo. Chanimal is trying to fear up the DPS and slow down the assault. Ring of Peace misses a bit there. They can easily go in and out of the room. I was really hoping that we'd see a double Ring of Peace and just pin Chanimal against the wall during the Infernals, and that way he can't counter aggress and just run him over, but we haven't seen that double Ring of Peace strategy just yet from Never Lucky. In the meantime, momentum swings in favor of the Super Frogs. Colo trades, but now Zach is left open. He has to exchange Touch of Karma to stay in the fight. Valido still has options. Colo gets feared away, and this is the thing that I love about Chanimal, is even though the pressure is all on him, he still finds opportunity to get out key spells. These Chaos Bolts alongside that Smoke Bomb could have been devastating. Zach manages to barely escape.
Yep, Chanimals with a great positioning allows Snuts to get off a lot of damage with that Flying Daggers build. Finally, it looks like Never Lucky, they realize this is maybe not a favored position for them, as all three members still trying to run down Chanimals. Cubsy actually potentially sitting down for a drink, recovers all of his mana, and that is a great spot to be in for the Super Frogs. Colo once again, Way of the Crane gets activated, but he's just throwing away his mana. This is definitely a risky strategy. It could pay off, but Zach really low, no touch of Karma, doesn't have the defense of the Fortifying Elixir. Diffuse Magic already used. Complete retreat here from Never Lucky.
Yeah, they need to reset, wait for defensive cooldowns before making another push, because if they try to right now, Super Frogs will punish surely and execute this series 3-0, which is highly unexpected in the matchup that we were predicting, having seen the performance from the European region. Snuts gets bursted down in a swap by Never Lucky. Trades out that feint, starting to slowly recover, but Cubsy regenerated full mana. Now there is no late game advantage either for Never Lucky. They will have to win in an overwhelming push, and I'm almost wondering if it's a better strategy for them to just attack Snuts around the pillar, wait until dampening and make a big push like we saw against Swapsy's Destruction Warlock, because right now things are falling apart.
This is a bit of a miscommunication there for Never Lucky. Colo charges in with the Way of the Crane. Zach ports out of line of sight across the map, so definitely not ideal offensive pressure there from Never Lucky in that situation. But now with the triple leg sweep, this is the kind of damage. These are the setups that we want to see. Chanimal's getting low, getting bursted down. Double leg sweep. That was nicely done. Good communication by Zach and Colo. Chanimal getting low. Iron Bark, unending resolve. Everything committed. Chanimal's looking for counter pressure. Anti-magic zone gets dropped out by Valido to really shut that down. Cubsy tops him off, but what a scary moment that was for Super Frogs.
All right, Never Lucky, they've still got damage and big push potential here against the Super Frogs. They're on match point. They have to swing 3 in a row. Will they be able to pull it off is the question. Super Frogs have great pressure, great setup as we see a kill attempt here onto Zach. Colo denies it, so Snuts is going to switch targets, going after Colo in the backline while Chanimal builds pressure in other places. Maledict attempt here on Zach, multiple incoming. Diffuse Magic well timed on Zach's part to remove that healing absorption effect, and now this next Way of the Crane really needs to get a kill. Colo needs to wait for that Manatee. Chanimal knows that it's coming. He's trying to retreat even further away, out position, and this way Colo will stack up for that Flying Daggers build. I like this repositioning from Chanimal, but in the meantime, Never Lucky pulled the trigger first, pulling Cubsy into the fight. He opts to use that Glider's Medallion, knowing their defense is quite limited. This could be the final push of the game from Never Lucky if they want to stay in the upper bracket. Do they have enough damage to take down Chanimal with this push? The crowd control looks good, but Colo gets feared on the Crane. Chanimal gets to safety, and Chanimal's positioning just looks immaculate.
And it always is. Chanimal, such an all-star for this roster on the Destruction Warlock. Colo almost completely tapped on mana at this point. Zach's got to be feeling a little bit scared too. His Saphir on the Chanimals. Life Cocoon finally connects from Colo to keep Zach alive, but still another 8 seconds on that touch of Karma. And until then, Zach is increasingly vulnerable. Incapacitate on Cubsy. Still Never Lucky, looking to find pressure on the Chanimals, but there's just so much momentum for Super Frogs right now. Colo's really going to struggle to recover.
That Flying Daggers build from Snuts is developing huge momentum for the team. Zach has to exchange his final defense, maybe go all out for a kill, but then he gets feared on it. Chanimal knows exactly how to deny every single push that Never Lucky throws his way. Cubsy still with a significant mana lead. Snuts is just training down Colo. Ring of Peace at least protects Colo maybe for a bit, but Chanimals is finally getting bursted. He's trying to counter pressure with the Dark Soul. It's a game of chicken here. Who is going to end up running away first? Snuts is coming back to the battle. Colo might go for a drink, but Zach is too exposed. They drop the Smoke Bomb. The Super Frogs trying to close this out. Zach portals to safety, but how safe is it? Snuts closes in to try and get the kill, interrupting Colo's heals. Zach is still low on health. Snuts has pressure on multiple players. Chanimal is 1v1ing Valido in midfield, and it's not looking too good for Never Lucky.
No, Snuts moves in. Kidney shot on Colo, still trying to take down Zach. Zach trying to survive, incapacitate paralysis onto Snuts. Colo low, really no mana left, but he does. He uses the Way of the Crane. Can they deny him? Evasion denies all of the healing. Colo has to find a target, but he just can't. Life Cocoon gets traded out full blind by Snuts. Colo trinkets out. Snuts basically forcing every single thing Colo had left in that exchange. He gets the trinket. He gets the life cocoon. He gets away the crane. Colo with really running on fumes. Vendetta gets used onto Zach. Zach, no touch of Karma. Another 10 seconds. Can they take him down? Even Cubsy's getting into the fight with some Solar Wrath. Zach running away. He has to retreat. Colo needs to keep him alive for just a little bit longer. Never Lucky does manage to stay alive.
Staying alive, but definitely not getting aggressive whatsoever. And now the defense for the Super Frogs has rotated back up and available. Cubsy looks like he's sneaking away to regenerate mana just to secure this and close it out if it does go longer. And he's got a significant lead now over Colo. Snuts is the target. Potentially they can take him out. I'm very surprised that we haven't seen swaps to hit Snuts earlier on in the fight. That Rogue is much more likely to go down than the Destruction Warlock. Never Lucky, they look cheeky in their play, but their defense and their late game potential is just lacking in the tournament today. They're going to want to clean it up if they end up going down to the lower bracket to face against Method Orange. Snuts shadow stepping out defensively, realizing he's vulnerable. Instead, is just going to kite Zach and Valito as long as he can, and hopefully Chanimal can develop some pressure. Full Fear secured. Infernals have landed. Chanimal taking this game into his own hands here. Anti-Magic Zone will trade, but Zach gets Mortal Coiled out of it. Colo opts to use the Life Cocoon, but now Colo has limited defense. Snuts doesn't seem to care. He's just using Kidney Shot to stall, trying to get that mana advantage really in his favor. All three targets low on health. No mana in sight for Colo to way of the Crane, and Super Frogs continue to squeeze their grip.
Yeah, Never Lucky, though. They've been doing a good job. Colo, with no mana, has been able to keep his team alive. But like you said, there's just not that much pressure. Chanimal, still with the Unending Resolves, can be feeling healthy. Now Kidney Shot secured onto Valito. He responds with the Icebound Fortitude and will trade evenly to stay alive. Snuts now turning his attention onto Zach as he rolls away, and Super Frogs are doing a great job denying these kills, but they're just not actually finding the killing blow in this matchup. But potentially could only be a matter of time. We're at 18% dampening. Colo's actually been regenerating mana at this point with how defensive Never Lucky's playing. He's really not having to throw out too much healing, saving some mana. Potentially looking for one more push with that Way of the Crane.
This is what I thought they should do just throughout the entire game. Just attack Snuts if he overextends, line of sight the Warlock, then deep dampening, push the Warlock over. I mean, that's what we saw happen in Europe as well. So it's just a safer route, but Never Lucky don't want to play for the safer route. They just like getting in there and trying to get a kill. But in the current meta, I just don't think that play style is going to pay off. Snuts getting a lot of flying daggers, fan and knives. They grip Chanimal behind the corner, trying desperately to get an unending resolve with this push. If they are unable to get that defensive cooldown, that it is really starting to look grim because the mana lead is so much in favor of Cubsy. Super Frogs on match point. Never Lucky need a kill right here and right now. And Chanimal gates to safety. Zack in hot pursuit with the Fist of Fury flying. Ironbark denies the kill there. Now Valito getting pressured. Colo dips low. Unending resolve exchanged aggressively, but Ring of Peace locks Chanimal in the room, potentially out of line of sight. No, Cubsy is able to heal from his current position, but still the Unending Resolve is now down. Triple stun secured. It's looking good for Never Lucky to punch back in this fight. And Chanimal, what are you gonna do? There's nothing left for him to stay alive. Cubsy can't keep him up, and Never Lucky managed to stay in it by just slowing down, staying calm, and going for the safe play.
You know, you go back to the first Unending Resolve that needs to be used, and you say, okay, wow, that was like a huge mistake. Ultimately, I believe Zach like poured it away, and then we saw a complete waste of Way of the Crane. And it was like, wait, that was the big push. That was the one that should have closed it out. And then you're like, okay, well, they really don't have that many goes left. We keep talking about the ticking time bomb that this comp is. It doesn't have that many goes, but they make it to 24%. Dampening Zico. How on earth do they even live to see this go?
Well, that's the thing. If Colo just doesn't put himself in harm's way like that and just stays very, very far back, then he can actually just use his Mana Tea, channel out the Soothing Mist with the Counteract Magic. He's going to be able to sustain his teammates fairly well. And as long as Zach also, knows when to kind of dip in and out and use Valito to soak up some of that damage and just heal himself up with the Death Strikes, they can keep the game going for a long period of time. Even on Dalaran Sewers, the game could have been extended for a long period of time. Instead, they played aggressive, and then they got punished for that aggressive play. As long as they play a little bit more passive, especially Colo, then I feel like this is their matchup. This is why I was saying, even when Super Frogs was up 2-0, that they're playing an unfavored matchup and just winning because they're playing better.
Before that one, the Frogs were looking totally dominant, and now the question is, do they need to change comps? Do they try to counter comp? Don't look at me like that. Do they try to counter comp in this next one, Ben?
I think so. I mean, I think at this point it's likely we go to Tolvaron Arena. Superfrog says, okay, lock it in once again, and then Superfrogs, they have a lot of answers. We've seen them play the Mage Lock Druid, and I got to be honest, when they play the Mage Lock Druid, it looked a lot better than when Method Black did. I think that's an option for them. They could bring Snuts on the Elemental Shaman, although we did see Wildcard Gaming sort of answer all of these spell cleaves. I think Superfrogs isn't going to be afraid to try to lock that in and secure a win.
Super, do you think that's the answer?
I mean, it's the logical one, but having seen, I don't know, with Colo's performance right now in terms of late game potential, I think it is the right move. Go for a wizard game and play for a late game and hope that you can rely on efficiency mistakes on the side of Never Lucky.
Even with those efficiency mistakes, though, how was Colo able to make it to 24% dampening? Like, we already start to discuss this, but he wasn't necessarily looking the most efficient. Then he manages to get, like, a little bit more passive. They stay alive. Is that the thing that you bank on?
Yeah, just stay back and channel Soothing Mists. Use Way of the Crane if you have to, or if you have crowd control on Cubsy, if Cubsy trinkets the crowd control like he did on Dalaran, don't go in and force it. Just stay on max range again. Just keep healing, because the biggest thing is if you're far away from Snuts and he has to run to blind you and then run all the way back, it's much harder for him to even get that damage out. The other thing as well that we have to mention is the adaptation of finally Colo is playing Trinket. He's playing that Gladiator's Medallion, which lines up with the blind. In the previous games, for some reason, he's been playing Relentless, which means that he can use his Way of the Crane, get blinded, then get sapped on it. And like Veneruki mentioned, we are going to go to Tolvaron Arena here and potentially see a Wizard cleave, maybe the Shadow Priest Mage, or even the Elemental Shaman Mage, or even the Lock Mage from Superfrogs.
Yeah, definitely. And just speaking about that Trinket Relentless choice, I think what it was, Never Lucky, the first two games they were playing Human, which I think is a mistake because they are susceptible to that blind. So they went over to the Orc so they can sort of deal with those stuns just passively with that hardiness ratio, I believe it's called, and they still have the Trinket available to get out of blind for Colo.
So now with Tolvaron Arena, we can expect Superfrogs to fully take advantage of their map pick. Never Lucky going to stay with this composition. It seems like the one that has gotten them here. It seems like the composition that they can navigate wins on even when they seem to be down and out already. They won't go out of this series without swinging a couple of punches. They've grabbed one. Superfrogs, though, still on match point.
I really want to see what they lock in. They've set themselves up well for a Wizard Cleave composition, and they've definitely got multiple. So which one is the best option then at that case? And I feel like it's so hard to tell. And they're going to go with the Shadow Priest Mage rather than the Destruction Warlock Mage. They get a bit more instant damage. They get a bit more utility and support and defense in this regard, but they lose really big punches that the Elemental Shaman would have brought. It's I think, a more broad and safe pick in terms of the options that they had.
We talked about Shadow Priest quite a bit too, and how strong it really could be, maybe with some of those changes like the Bonded Soul changes. In practice, Eco, is that what we've seen in this tournament?
We've seen it in some games, but I really feel like, I mean, Superfrogs did win earlier yesterday when they played this composition as well against the boys, but they also lost playing against the boys. Now, the boys played Windwalker DK as well, just with the Resto Druid healer, so it's a little bit similar, but still, I would say the Mistweaver is a lot more mana efficient, and we could potentially see the same thing that we saw over in Europe, where Never Lucky just kind of sits back, and they just, you know, they just relax for a second there, wait a little bit for dampening to kick in, maybe wait for 10% dampening, and then they can just start doing the same big pushes. Now it's going to be on a Shadow Priest and not a Warlock, but they fundamentally have the same weakness of just being very immobile, and the Shadow Priest has a little bit shorter cooldown on his dispersion. You have the Fade as well, which is a smaller CD that you can kind of use, and you also have the Void Shift, so you have a little bit more defense there, but ultimately you can punish the same kind of weakness there. So I feel like if Never Lucky plays it patiently, they could still potentially punish Snuts here on that Warlock and take him down.
So it all comes down to patience for you if you're Never Lucky. We keep hearing it regardless of the composition. There were a lot of inefficiencies with Colo, but it seems like the pick, it seems like the composition is one that can still win them this series.
Well, the reason I kind of like the Shadow Priest a little bit more for Superfrogs over the Warlock is, although the Warlock early stages is a lot stronger, they are still susceptible to those all-ins. And like we kind of talked about, their Unending Resolve doesn't trade favorably with the Touch of Death, with the Way of the Crane. So if they use the Way of the Crane and Touch of Death, they get Unending a resolve, they just wait and do it again. Whereas the Shadow Priest with the low cooldown dispersion, the low cooldown fade, they do have at least a little tools to deal with that if it does get to a little bit of a later game. I don't think Never Lucky is out of this by any stretch of the imagination. I still think this is a composition that can win, but I think if Super Frogs plays it really well and potentially finds some mistakes in Never Lucky's gameplay, they can definitely win.
It seems like the Shadow Priest really just has all the tools that it needs in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Shadow Priest, for sure, are a lot stronger now because of the Resto Druid changes, because of the Bonded Soul changes as well, mainly the Bonded Soul changes, I would argue. Still, though, if you decide to kind of just sit back behind that pillar, you can do what we saw happen against Method Black. Obviously, I agree with Van here. The Shadow Priest is for sure a better pick other than compared to the Warlock, but I still see that same glaring weakness potentially being exploited, and I'm curious to see, because I think after this map, regardless of what happens here, I think Never Lucky are going to be picking potentially the Blade's Edge arena, and I think that could potentially be very, very good for them.
All right, a potential idea of what could happen in a Game 5, but Never Lucky needs to extend the series that far first. Otherwise, the Super Frogs are going to leap straight into the Grand Final.
All right, here we go, everybody. We're in the upper bracket. Never Lucky. This is the day of Colo's revenge. Will he actually get to enact on it is now the question. They're already down 2 games facing the Super Frogs, and the Super Frogs have strategically set themselves up well here with this broad composition. I think the Shadow Priest is the best of both worlds between the consistent damage that the Destruction Warlock may have brought and the burst that the Elemental Shaman could have brought to the table. It's definitely the safest pick and the best route to victory for the Super Frogs. But still, we saw the boys able to pull off victory in this same disadvantaged situation, so we cannot completely count Never Lucky out just yet.
Ooh, I actually really like this build from Wealthy Man. We don't normally see mages drop their water elemental, but I think in this particular matchup, it's very likely that Snuts is the main target. So what Wealthy Man's decided to do is he's basically loaded himself up with every single Frostbolt buffer in the game. For Azurite Trace, he is going with the Tunnel of Ice as well as the Flash Freeze, and he has the Lonely Winter, which is going to make it so he doesn't have a water elemental, but increases the damage of his Frostbolt, Ice Lens, and Flurry by 25%. So if he can basically sit back and turret, he's going to be able to do a lot of damage. But if Never Lucky punish him and they train him down, his damage output will be severely limited.
I'm really curious to see what Snuts can get done if he's left open. In the meantime, instead, Never Lucky switched their attention to him, bursting him down. Vampiric Embrace, good exchange of cooldowns by the team of Super Frogs, pairing that immediately after the use of Iron Bark so that the utility is spread evenly, and there will always be an answer for every push that Never Lucky throws their way. Having gotten that defense, we now see Never Lucky retreat away, pulling Wealthy Man around the corner, but as they pull him in, he activates Temporal Shield, so it's soaking up all this damage, heals him back up quite easily, and even though it was a good swap, that he gets away and Zach gets bursted. He cannot afford to make a mistake like portaling nowhere in the future. A push like that in dampening definitely would be a kill. Colo falling behind. Super Frogs looking solid here in Game 4.
Yeah, definitely, I'm trying to figure out what build Snuts is playing, if he's playing the Shadowy Apparitions with the Auspicious Spirits, and it looks like that is what he's going to be going after, so gets a little bit of instant cast damage. When a Shadow Word Pain does crit, he's going to get additional damage from that, especially if Vampiric Touch, sorry, is on the target. And I think both Snuts and Wealthy Man really looking for high damage builds, and it's going to force Never Lucky to run and hide in these matchups, really force them to just play it patient, look for grip kills, because if they do play on the open on Tolvaron Arena, with the build Snuts and Wealthy Man are playing, they are going to be able to easily take them down.
Yeah, the double caster threat, definitely a good strategic choice by the Super Frogs here on game number 4 as they look to just close the series out 3-1. Cubsy needs to keep his eye on his mana into the late game. Colo on that Mistweaver will outdo him unless he is able to find opportunities to drink and regenerate mana. Wealthy Man laying Blizzard on the corner of the pillar, so what the enemy team tries to retreat, he can maybe sneak in an extra Frostbolt. I like Snuts' positioning on the opposite side of the pillar so that this way, if Never Lucky try and retreat, at least Snuts or Wealthy Man will be able to attack. Even one at a time is better than no one.
Yeah, definitely. The math checks out. The only problem is when Snuts is on one side and Wealthy Man's on the other, that leaves Cubsy in sort of an awkward position where he has to choose which one of them he's going to be healing up. Luckily for Cubsy, he's feeling confident to push in, get behind the pillar, and heal both of them up. Now Zach forced to retreat once again as they're looking for a push onto Snuts. Nice double fear, setting up some damage. Colo in midfield, potentially looking for a way of the crane, but could just get polymorphed up by Wealthy Man. And once again, Never Lucky, they're forced to retreat.
Yeah, Never Lucky, though, of managing their mana much better. If Colo had had this mana management earlier in the series, maybe they could have just 3-0'd Super Frogs. So definitely that's going to be a thought going through Never Lucky's mind here as they desperately try to crawl back in this series to reverse sweep the Super Frogs. Gripping Snuts into the battle, double stun lock combination. Doesn't net them any defense. This is a bit disrespectful on the side of the Super Frogs and disappointing for Never Lucky, to say the least.
Yeah, no question about it. Colo throwing out the Life Cocoon before he goes into the polymorph. And there's not a lot of threat that Never Lucky will go down with this positioning, at least not until later on. But Never Lucky, they're going to have to decide which target do they want to go after. So far, it seems like they're just trying to find opportunities on whoever's closest. So it's a closest wizard strategy, as some players call it. Whatever one of these two casters is closest, that's the one that they will attack, just so they don't have to compromise their position. And I don't mind that. Cubsy and Stealth. Eventually, he needs to be careful, though. If he gets gripped in and caught into a leg sweep, that's definitely an opportunity for Never Lucky to just all in him. But Cubsy, being an expert druid, he knows the threat, and he doesn't want to have any part of it. Wealthy Man now caught into a full leg sweep. Snuts is going to have to try to find some counter pressure. Wealthy Man blinks away. And now at 2% dampening, things are going to start ramping up very quickly for these teams. And Never Lucky, they're not going to be able to afford to just sit and hide behind the pillar.
Oh, Snuts gets pinned against the pillar. Things are getting riveting for the Super Frogs. Triple Psychic Stream by Snuts to try and deflect. Will it be enough? It looks like it's going to be with Cubsy's Iron Bark, and we'll finally answer the question if the Super Frogs are indeed unhoppable.
Unhoppable. I get it. Instead, it's unstoppable. Stop throwing things, Rich.
Rich.
Wealthy Man getting bursted down. Temporal Shield was used. Looks like Snuts is going to be able to save him with that life grip. Definitely important for Super Frogs in terms of defense. If Wealthy Man ever gets caught without a shimmer, he's behind the pillar. Snuts can use the Leap of Faith to grip him to safety. And, I mean, that's going to pay off dividends for Super Frogs. They don't really get any defensive cooldowns traded out, even though that was a nice attempt by Never Lucky. Still just hiding behind the pillar. Colo, like you said, he's been managing his mana quite well. Cubsy isn't falling behind. He's been going for drinks when he really needs to. And both of these teams really don't want to commit in this matchup.
These grip, stun, pin at the pillar strategies from Never Lucky are cute, but you need to be deadly, not cute in a tournament setting. Will they have enough damage later in the match to net themselves objectives like Ice Block or Dispersion is the question. So far, it hasn't been enough damage, and dampening now at 11%. Cubsy has maintained his mana for the late game. I would like to see Wealthy Man and Snuts split up. They actually swapped to Colo, catching him a bit out of position. Anti-magic zone of Valito saves him. Cubsy pauses his health with a Cyclone and then sneaks away into the room to drink, not overextending. Realizing the enemy team may try and retreat, so he wants to try and take advantage of that moment of defense to regenerate mana, and I think he was able to. He's back to full. Definitely solid for the Super Frogs here in game number 4.
Yeah, Cole's sitting down, trying to recover some mana. Doesn't really have any opportunity. The Wealthy Man has Touch of Death on him right now. This is a scary situation for the Super Frogs because he might have to commit the Iron Bark. Still opting not to. Silence now on Colo. Zach getting bursted down as Life Cocoon gets traded out by Colo to keep Zach afloat as he pushes into the midfield. Wealthy Man blinks away. And now, Never Lucky, they have overstayed their welcome. Snuts with the beautiful mind control, bringing Valito back into the open. And these situations where Never Lucky, they make a push, it's going to be becoming more and more difficult for Colo to actually recover. Now another swap on a Colo. Cubsy moving in, gets the bash. What is Colo going to trade out? He ports away, dispels himself. He should be just fine.
Yeah, will Never Lucky choke, or will the Super Frogs croak? We'll find out here as Never Lucky desperately want to battle this series back and just secure a spot in the grand finals and sit comfortably there rather than have to play out a potential fatiguing series against Method Orange. In the meantime, Snuts secures triple crowd control for the team and tries to set up burst, fake casting multiple interrupts. Snuts MVP really for the team of Super Frogs, multi-classing his strategy, his communication, his playmaking capability. I am more than ecstatic to see Snuts' return to the tournament setting. He could definitely be a top contender for North America to take out Europe in the spring finals later this year. They're looking solid and well-rounded. I think even if the meta changes, they'll still have an answer. Never Lucky gripping Snuts in and trying to catch him off guard. Dampening's pretty high, Snuts. You're trying to get away without using Dispersion. Iron Bark appears to be enough for now as Snuts makes his getaway.
He fades, and I think at this point, Snuts is going to start playing a lot more cautious, but all three members of Never Lucky, they're moving in. If they can get Dispersion, Snuts could be in a lot of trouble. but he manages to escape. Full polymorph onto Colo. Life Cocoon gets dropped out. Now, once again, Never Lucky, they have to retreat. But the thing is, for Snuts, he still has his trinket rotating back up, dispersion available, Fade's going to be up, and they didn't really get any of those major defensive cooldowns they needed to.
Colo portaling back. What I've noticed here is that when Never Lucky makes a big 3-man push, right at the end of it, we see Super Frog switch to Colo and try and burst him down. Now that they've done that a couple of times, I feel like Colo should be ready for it, so he can preemptively activate the fortifying elixir, reduce damage on himself, increase his max health, and make it much less likely that he dies. But so far, they haven't gotten any of the major objectives. No Void Shift and no Ice Blocks. Never Lucky really, this is the point where they should be starting to get those major objectives so that they can get a kill at the 40 or 50% dampening mark. Snuts is positioning so that Zach has to chase him into that wizard corner. This is exactly where Wealthy Man wants them. Look at all 3 members out in midfield. Ripe for the pickings here of Wealthy Man. Zach gets bursted, but he's trying to race for a kill as well with Touch of Death, amplifying his damage. Snuts needs to be careful. Dispersing on very low health. This is going to be a game of chicken, and towards the end of deep dampening, who's going to fall first? It's anyone's match.
Yep, they did get the dispersion from Snuts, but it's only a 1.5 minute cooldown, so that rotates up rather quickly, and Zach committed quite a bit there. The Diffuse Magic, Touch of Karma, Touch of Death, basically everything. Now comes into the Incapacitate. They're looking to take down Snuts. He trinkets out. He's looking to make a getaway. Zach getting counter-pressured away by Wealthy Man. Wealthy Man almost has that very powerful cooldown. Icy Veins up in 14 seconds, and that's really when he's going to be able to solo the team. With the build he's playing, his Frostbolts are going to hit very hard if he can get a Flurry proc and shatter that damage. Bash now onto Colo. Valido and Zach really going to have to think twice about just leaving Wealthy Man alone, but Snuts really is the best kill target for them at this point, so it's kind of do or die.
I mean, he is for roughly 38 seconds or so, and then after that, it's a complete reset. Whereas getting the Ice Blocks from Wealthy Man would be a lot more valuable as they're a 5-minute cooldown. So I would say that Super Frogs are in a position to just clean up this series and walk away with it. Perfectly timed Psychic Scream by Snuts denies the way of the Crane. Colo kind of walking into that and asking for it. Now polymorphed on. This is devastating for Never Lucky. Zach is just getting obliterated. Touch of Karma may not even be enough. Snuts is going to race against it to try and find a kill. Diffuse Magic keeps Zach afloat a little bit longer, but how much so is the case? Basically everything traded. They try and go for the kill. 2 seconds away from that dispersion. Snuts dips low, but dispersion rotates back, healing Snuts back into the fight. Zach has got to make a choice. Does he make a push with no defense, or does he just chill at the pillar for deeper dampening? It's still too close to call.
Colo is actually missing out on a lot of healing. He's not replacing his Serpent Jade statue. It's still behind the pillar at their original hiding spot, and because of that, he doesn't get that additional Soothing Mist from that talent, missing out on a lot of free healing that's uninterruptible. So potentially that's one of the reasons why Never Lucky has had to run and hide a lot more in this matchup. Snuts still taking some burst damage, but looking healthy still with Trinket and Void Shift. We really want to see Snuts hold on to his Trinket so he can always pair that with the Void Shift. Valido getting low. And this is the point of the match as well, is where Valido is very vulnerable to this damage. He's not going to be able to heal himself up for nearly as much with Death Strike. Zach getting low as well. Colo really doesn't have many tools left, and I think Zach, this is the final moment of the game. He gets behind the pillar at 1% health, keeping himself alive with Vivify, but all damage, all control with Super Frogs. This is looking like a KO, and Super Frogs manages to close out this series and make their way to the grand finals.
They're going to do just that, and that already is a pretty big accomplishment for them when you look at how early the boys did bow out. Now, they could grab another 20 points by winning, but already this is looking very good for them for the entirety of the year in the standings overall. But Never Lucky, rematch against Method Orange. Let's talk about how they got there.
Well, I mean, honestly, Super Frogs, they just played to their strengths. You can see the triple triangle formation. Snuts on one side of the pillar, Wealthy Man on the other side of the pillar, Cubsy behind them, and they're all just basically teeing off damage on whoever they can. Zach being the primary target. Whenever Zach runs away, then they go for Valido. Now, Super Frogs are playing to their win conditions phenomenally, but the problem here, I think, is how some of these pushes were happening from the side of Never Lucky, because you really need to, first of all, have your Jade Serpent statue at a good spot, and second of all, you don't push in with Way of the Crane as your first global. If you look at Looney and what we were talking about in their series, we saw Looney get crowd controlled when everybody stopped using his life cocoon before that crowd control hits. Then he comes out of the crowd control, being on diminishing return, activate the Way of the Crane, and that's when they go and get those big cooldowns. Colo on the other end, just activating the Way of the Crane, charging in, getting feared on it, getting polymorphed on it. That's not how you want to play it at all. And I mean, we've seen him in at least 2 of these games just get completely crowd controlled on that Way of the Crane. So needs to clean that up for sure, and just tank the CC chain when your teammates are full HP, when they have their own defensive CDs, then use your Way of the Crane to add the extra punch.